Hello, welcome from my side. Thank you for the introduction. As said, I'm working with Siemens Mobility here in Thailand, but I'm also speaking for the German Thai Railway Association here. And yeah, I was asked to make a presentation about standards. Standards sounds like a pretty dry topic, why it's needed. So I wanna give you a look into standards, what we want to achieve, what it means, and then like illustrate that with some examples. Okay, yes, I think also here in Thailand, the targets for standards have been voiced. Always come in the same topic. We want to get cheaper systems in the end. We want to speed up the implementation. We want interoperability. We want more safety. And we want to create a national railway industry that can export things. So putting this into context, then somebody says, yes, standardization. So if I bring it to me, I would have the same targets, but it doesn't mean I write my own standards. So what I put a bit here in comparison is the looking at local standards versus international standards. I have been living 3 years in Beijing and was dealing with the high-speed trains as well. And as we heard before, even in China, actually, they started with international standards before they moved more to local standards on a big market. So international standards advantage global competition, and this is no question that brings down the prices, that makes sure that the systems are actually in quality competing, and you have also international regulatory bodies. You have consultants that certify, you have other third-party industries that ensure quality. So that's definitely an advantage for international standards. Now, local standards, they're always somewhere needed, like in Russia with extreme deep temperatures, or in Australia you have bushfires that's never recognized internationally. So there is a need for a customization sometimes, but not everywhere. And you start actually with a long-term, with an international standard. Now, let's say often flexibility in requirements and state control is a benefit for local standards. Nonetheless, a state can, or state authority can be part of the bodies of the UIC, of all the bodies, and actually influence also international standards. So you can actually participate as well. Now, so for me, coming from these targets, okay, actually that's not the last version. There were some answers here for some of these topics. Clearly, long-term affordability, you look at the solutions that have the most suppliers offering it, right? That brings you down the prices, and long-term also means you want a broad implementation. If we look at some of the examples, that they develop further, that they don't stuck in time over the time you operated, over your 30 years. Yeah, interoperability, of course, you need to look to your neighbors, and if we look at safety, building a new standard from scratch, and China was an example. It needs time to get out of the teething problems, right? If you start from scratch, the first projects will have challenges with it. So if you want to start quick, if you want an affordable price, and then develop, you start with an international standard. That's also the Chinese model. Now, so that was a rather dry part, and now I hope to do that a bit, underlie that with examples. So of course, I picked some some areas where there are standards out, where we think also that can help, and I want to illustrate why that makes sense. Of course, vehicle and tracks, and I will not go into this, right? There are a lot of standards out, and you need to check that you actually want to cross a border, what is your neighbor doing? Or if you buy vehicles or want to sell them, you need to make sure that you actually attract your market. If you just adapt to your neighbor's specification, then your neighbor will supply you with the vehicles, not you supply the vehicles to the neighbor that has an overcapacity already. So let's start ETCS, and it fits perfectly to the presentation before. I'll not go into technical details, was explained also on the CTCS. The core point of ETCS, the European Train Control System, was the idea that an onboard unit from Alstom can work with a trackside unit from Siemens. This was the whole idea, separating infrastructure, onboard units to diversify the market, breaking open suppliers' monolithic system constraints. And it was mentioned, the TSIs, Technical Standards of Interoperability, they are the key thing of it. And you need to be certified with it. And as we heard, even HolySys provides ETCS units. So there are most suppliers in the market participate in this standard. Now, so this is a Siemens view. Siemens onboard units, and why I use this slide, ETCS has the European in, but it came way beyond just being a European system. So this is where Siemens ETCS onboard units have been supplied. As we heard, also China has supplied ETCS onboard units also to Turkey. Siemens also has in Turkey. But even Australia, New Zealand, go to ETCS standard, Northern Africa as well. So it's way beyond just an European system anymore, but it was developed, and we see it by the size simply because the small nation states and the need for cross-border travel, and especially in freight. Good. Now, second point, TSIs, I talked about it, technical standards of interoperability. They are continuously being developed because it becomes such a widespread system, such a widespread concept. So again, no Siemens slides. This is what the European Union brings, just as an example of software updates, necessary software updates and liabilities over time. So these standards get developed, and every party who adopts it can become also part of the discussion of the specification and bring in definition and changes. Of course, having, I don't know, 20 state railways in one room, the time it takes to get to an agreement is much longer than if Chinese rail says it wants to add something. But this is not a closed standard, so everybody is invited to participate, and it leads to continuous improvements, which is good for small countries to participate, not being locked in for 15, 20 years to systems that might be discontinued. So another point that I wanted to touch on here, it was introduced by Professor Monpilai that I'm also responsible for cybersecurity. This is another topic where interoperability works. So for example, Siemens, we have our key management center, and we can manage keys from Alstom trains, Bombardier trains, CUF trains. We haven't tried it with the HolySys systems, but I believe it will work too. So this standardization, it gives you a chance in the future in cybersecurity, right? In the old time, keys, you got one key and it worked for 30 years. If I look now at Australia, no way they will allow it. If there's just a hint of an attack or vulnerability, they say change all the keys, right? If you have systems from 5 different suppliers, how are you going to do it? This is TSI, this is the interoperability. Don't need to be a Siemens system. Don't know it, but I'm pretty sure Alstom has a similar system and could also manage Siemens keys. This is what the standard is for. Good. And last one also, one of the target points was always Thailand wants to create a national railway industry. And now that doesn't only mean that I have a Thai vehicle, it means also engineers. It means well-paid jobs. So Siemens serving our signaling customers in Asia, but also somewhat even in UK. We have an engineering center here in Thailand. It's Thai jobs, and they do work for the standards. They use and apply the signaling standards. Thailand has a great advantage, right? The mentality, the education, people, it's this software-hardware interface. In railway, that's crucial. If I look to China, it's more about software, more about software. Here in Thailand, the mindset is still software-hardware interface. That is great for engineers, plus the low cost rate. It brings up industry here, applying the standards also on here, making sure that universities teach it. This is a way to bring rail industry locally to Thailand, not only to define a new Thai standard. Okay, so I think this was a part that was maybe expected from me to talk about ETCS, but I have some more examples. Next one, maintenance. Maintenance, everybody thinks, well, what's standardization and maintenance? Also here in Europe, there is a new regulation. You see a bit the history, but it came up. So Europe standardized the maintenance functions, clear functionalities, clear interfaces, and also performance standards that can be certified by external bodies. Why? Just the European Union want to make it more comparable. They want also to speed up process of tendering, of writing this out, and comparing offers and definitions, roles and responsibilities. So in Europe, it's called Entity in Charge of Maintenance. There are 4 with clear defined roles and responsibilities. So, as I said, you can also make sure that processes are there from the beginning. It ensures the customer that whomever he gives a certain role, ECM 1, 2, 4, that he fulfills and understands the criteria. He doesn't need to do himself so many audits. He can outsource it. He can ensure that there's global practice. So like this is, for example, one certificate from Siemens that got, but I just included here something from others that is freely available on the web. Every supplier in Europe who provides maintenance needs to follow now the entity in charge of maintenance standards, unifying maintenance. So another area that is also closer to my actual work, data analytics. Now, you may know Siemens, of course, promotes Railigent and promotes data analytics that come from the field into the cloud. Today, often, and Siemens is not the only supplier that does that, often this is a proprietary standard. So solutions that I have, they work with the OEM's own assets. They own trains, this is what we can do best. Now, if I look at networks, a network, the bigger it gets, the more, the higher the chances that he actually has assets and rolling stock from more than one supplier. This is what we actually want to speed up and have competition. Now, how can I compare the data? Also here, there is a standard. It's out for a while, but often not applied. So UIC 50405 is a standard of diagnostic data that needs to come from a train in a certain way to a cloud, to a land site, to be analyzed. What's the advantage for it? Is that I can compare a Siemens fleet, an Alstom fleet, a CRRC fleet. I can use my tools and get the same data or comparable data, not the same data, comparable data, and not investing in too many things and having 3 different screens for 3 different fleets, right? Especially if you want to build something of your own on top, you need those standards. Good. Last, and I think this is also one of the more fancy topics. Everybody talks about it. Mobility as a service. Siemens also big supplier of mobility as a service. What we see here is Austria, especially Vienna. I think that's one of our best showcases because it's so connected. Everything's connected in real time there. So going back, even in markets where Siemens is the major supplier. If I look at Switzerland, at point Siemens had 70–80% of the market share. If I want to do mobility as the service right, that's still not enough. I still need to connect the rest of the 30% of the assets. And whether Siemens is building an app or somebody else builds the app doesn't matter. And I want to connect the taxis. I want to connect the bicycles that I can rent. I want to connect so many things. So to do mobility as a service right, and not just having half a fleet or something somewhere, we need to look at standardization. So that's a bit what they really, if you have a chance, and one of the trade fairs, we do show this. There is nowhere a Siemens logo on, but it's actually in Vienna. It's a Siemens app. It's really highly interconnected. And what it needed, or what Vienna did, they mandated the data standard for all of their assets. So GTFS and the RT stands for real-time data. The better the data are, the more convenient your MaaS app can be. If somebody wants, a city wants to go there, it is taking the standards, mandating it. So beside the GTFS, there's also the series standard that's Australia uses it a lot. Comparable things, but the point is, if I want to get across suppliers, or if I need to get across suppliers, somewhat a standard is needed, and the fastest way to get to a standard is looking actually at an international standard and making sure that they have more than one supplier who can actually offer it, and that's improved on a long term. Yeah, and with that, that's my 20 minutes. If you want to contact me, scan this or look for me on LinkedIn. And happy to receive any questions.
All right, thank you so much. Very impressive presentation. Any question from the floor? Oh, yes, of course, I would allow.
First of all, just a little bit of background for me. Before I left Bombardier, I was Product Safety Director worldwide for Bombardier Transportation. So I totally agree with what you said. It can be taken a little further, though. We, in Bombardier, which is dead, sorry, used a statement that said, we will design our trains to state of the art. Because if you don't, you can be open to litigation. So we didn't just design to TSIs. We would take the TSIs as a base and look at the global standards, find out which was the more challenging, and then define a set of standards for a train. Engineer once and sell everywhere was the sort of philosophy. So if there was something that conflicted in a Japanese standard or a Chinese standard, we would build in the worst case. So we didn't have to redesign the train every time. Zafiro is a good example of that, which unfortunately Alstom no longer own. So I totally agree with your presentation, but it can be taken one step further. But everything can.
Absolutely, and I think it's more a call also to customers and regulators to apply those standards. If they are not applied, you're a step behind. So sure, and especially if you apply standards like we saw on the ETCS level 2, where you expect that there will be changes coming later in the future, right? If we look at ETCS, where they're looking at now, at ATO, for example, over ETCS, or the 5G, topics come up, standards improve. I'm pretty sure the maintenance standards, they will put more functionality requirements in there in the future. So if you apply that standard, and apply a standard that lifts, right? This is a call to the manufacturers, to the maintainers, to be a step ahead. So it's one argument for requesting international standards.
Exactly right.
Okay. We can have a last question before moving to the next topic. Any question?